All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Four Wide. As you can see, there are two of us in Four Wide this week. We've got some other things going on. Weddings in the fall is not a good idea, but that kind of takes away somebody from us today. And Jonathan's a little busy. But you get me, Jeremiah Stoddard, and Dan Kiley. We are going to keep you updated on the Chiefs and Bills game. I'm looking over to my side right now. Actually, as I say that, 51 seconds left in the game. Buffalo just picked off Patrick Mahomes, and they're up by 4. So Kansas City's only got 2 timeouts, so they'll probably ice this game away and take that win. So that might be it. And it was a pretty darn good game. We'll cover that in a little bit as well. But a lot of decent games across the league. It's in this time where it's 6 games in, right? Am I right? 6 games today.
Yeah, this is
I
a
think this
sixth
is
game
week
for a
6.
lot of
Yeah.
teams. Yeah.
So this is week 6, and you've got a lot of emotion starting to run over across the league. And you've seen a few things a couple weeks ago, and then this week you're seeing a lot more of that kind of stuff pop up as well. And it's where you kind of know what type of team you are right now at this point. And so you're seeing frustration from certain players. And I'll kick it over to Dan a little bit on this part. And first, obviously, I think everybody probably saw how Tom Brady exploded on the sideline again. What was it? A few weeks ago, he broke a tablet and went off from stuff that week. And this week, he's over here just yelling and cussing out his teammates on the sideline. I think it was his offensive line. I couldn't tell exactly who it was, but starts going crazy again. And what does that tell you, Dan? Like when you start seeing stuff like that from Tom Brady again after a couple weeks ago, I mean, he clearly is frustrated in Tampa right now.
Well, absolutely, he is, and you have to understand also. And I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan in the world. I don't know if you are. I am not. Joe Montana's still my guy. He'll never take that place from Joe Montana. But Tom Brady, the reason he has so much success is because he demands perfection from everybody. And you could always tell in New England when he got personnel he didn't like because he would start throwing temper tantrums. When guys who with egos were wanting to do their own thing, he would start to throw a temper tantrum. And then what it would end up happening in New England is they would get rid of all those people. Because if Tom Brady didn't want you there, if he didn't want you part of what he was doing, they would get rid of you. Okay. Now, I don't know if he still has that cachet in Tampa Bay, but what you're seeing is him reacting to guys not being on the same page as him, guys who are not taking the game as seriously as he is. And there was that little joking Twitter post out there today, like I didn't leave my wife and kids for this, right? Losing to Pickett or whatever.
Yeah,
And
losing to
you know
Pickett
that's
at halftime.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all fun and stuff, and I get it. And it's funny to laugh and stuff, but there's a lot of truth behind that. Where Tom Brady he just wants perfection, and he only wants guys who want to play football. Like he's not about that nonsense. He just really isn't. Never has been. So him losing it on the sidelines has less to do with um, him not playing well or anything like that. I really, and this is my opinion, and I'll gladly hear yours. But my opinion is he is on a team with a bunch of guys who do not take the game as seriously as he does, and this is him basically putting them on Front Street.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of that. I mean, he was 25 for 40 with 243 yards and 1 touchdown today, so it wasn't a bad game from him, obviously. But as a team, they really couldn't get stuff going. They're now 3-3 on the year. They lose by 2 to the Steelers, and like you and I were talking pre-show, that was a pretty crazy game where you've got Kenny Pickett is in there and he goes down early in that game or about halfway through that game or something like that, and with a concussion. And then all of a sudden, Mitchell Trubisky has to come back in that game. Mitchell Trubisky then leads them to a game-winning drive because they were trailing, going into the fourth quarter and stuff. And then he leads them to a game-winning drive, a beautiful catch by Claypool in the corner of the end zone. So if you haven't seen that, guys, go look at it. It was a nice play on both parts from Trubisky and from Claypool. And then Claypool after the game was talking, and they asked him about Mitchell Trubisky, and he had nothing but good things to say. He was like, he's kind of in a difficult spot. He's got to sit there and back up Kenny Pickett after he was the starter, but he's been so prepared. Even when he's not being the starter, he's been sitting there helping everybody else be ready for this week. He was helping Pickett be ready for this week. So that way, and Claypool said when he got thrown into the game, he was ready for this week. And it showed that he was able to drive down and help win them that game. So you saw a lot of like camaraderie on that sideline. And then you flip to the other side where you're seeing all the extra frustration and stuff like that. And I think that comes into a team that, is coming off of a Super Bowl win, and now you're 3-3. So there's frustration from, like you said, a guy that's looking for perfection on his side, and he's not getting that right now. And he's really, really frustrated with it. Plus, you add in, like you made the joke, I didn't leave my wife and kids for, to be losing to Kenny Pickett at halftime. Yeah. I mean, he did decide to come back out of retirement, it put his family in a bad spot, and now they're struggling so bad. I'm sure he's probably questioning his decision at this point, just because it has impacted his life in so many aspects of it. So I'm sure all of that frustration really starts to build for him, along with the fact that they, just aren't playing as well as he feels they should be playing.
And you're 100% right. Where it's a frustration, right? And he's also to the point now where you can't leave the Buccaneers now. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not in professional sports, if you're a competitor, right, and you make a commitment to something, I know what my dad always told me. I'm sure you've heard this in your life. If you make a commitment, you're going to finish it, right? And athletes really take that seriously because, for the most part, athletes, I mean, there are some guys who just could care less, but I'm talking about guys who are good. And you made a commitment to this team, and there's not one other person counting on you. There's 53 other guys that are counting on you. You are a major part of that team. They built this team around you, and you're 100% right when you say he's in a really bad spot. Like, you can't walk away. Like, do I think that he doesn't want his family? Like, no, I don't think that for a second. But at the same time, he doesn't know how to say no. He doesn't know how to get away. And he's in a position now where, and this is where I think Giselle is out of bounds, where he's already made a commitment, right? If you had a problem with this, you should have shut it down before the season ever started, because once you get into the season, you can't just walk away from your team. Yeah, his legacy would be ruined forever. And I mean, granted, I would understand. I'm sure you would understand why he did it, but to
It would
sports
definitely
fans,
taint his legacy a little bit if he did that. Now, to be fair, we don't really know like what happened before he started the season. It might have been where like she told him like, "Listen, I really need you to not do this," and he decided he wanted to do it anyways and didn't go along with it. Which at that point was what I could say would lead to a divorce in the season and stuff, because she did tell him not to do it and he did it anyways, kind of thing. So I mean, maybe that did happen. I don't really know. On that part, it's obviously just speculation on that part, but it's just one of those things that he is a competitor, and no, he's not going to quit mid-season. He's going to keep going. But I was one that sat here and said, hey man, why come back on to a team after you win a Super Bowl and you're this late in? But I think it's because he's such a fierce competitor. He went away from the game and he was like, man, I can't not be playing football. I think he's got to be a part of football in some way. So I think he'll be one of those guys that retires and immediately gets into maybe coaching or maybe commentating or something of that nature, because he has to be a part of the game, right? And so I think that's just what you get right there. But I think that's enough of Tom Brady. There's some other stuff across the league that happened as well, talking about emotional reactions and everything. Another game was Carolina was playing against the Rams. And late in that game, I think it was like the third, fourth quarter, all of a sudden, Robbie Anderson gets kicked off the sideline by Steve Wilks, which is the interim head coach over there right now. He got kicked off the sideline and escorted to the locker room by one of the staffers in the middle of the game. Like, it wasn't as bad as when Antonio Brown left in the middle of the game, took his jersey off and stuff like that. But he left the game. He turned around and he was kind of yelling back things as he was walking off. So it was another emotional scene. And last week, Robbie Anderson had a good game too. And this week, all of a sudden, they're unraveling. Matt Rule gets fired, and they're now 1-5 after losing today. It's just a lot of things are starting to come undone and unglued for them in Carolina. I mean, how many times are we going to see somebody get kicked off the team, or not kicked off the team, but kicked off the sideline in the middle of the game? That's a rare thing to see.
It really is a rare thing to see. And a lot of the one biggest difference between college and NFL is you have obviously grown men dealing with grown men. I mean, even in college, they look like grown men. They are. But you have to remember, a lot of those kids are 18, 19, 20 years old. And if you can remember back to how immature you were at 18, 19, 20, right? But now you're dealing with 28, 29, 30, 35-year-old
Grown men. Yeah.
grown men with families, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just hits different, right? So I bring all that up to say a lot of times they keep that stuff behind the camera where you don't get to see all of that. And they do a really good job of hiding a lot of that emotion stuff. So I think that's to illustrate your point even further, Jeremiah, is that when you do see this, it is a little bit jarring because you don't see it. Like in college, you see guys getting punished and yelled at and screamed at and kicked off the team. I mean, that happens constantly. In the NFL, you rarely see it. And when you do, it's talked about, and it's a big deal because they're typically more professional across the board, whether it be coaches or players, and they try to keep it off the front page of the paper. Now, I will say this. the Panthers situation is a little bit different because for whatever reason, their front office decided it was a really good idea to put out there all week that they were seeking a trade or at least listening to trade for Christian McCaffrey, one of the best running backs in the NFL. What makes him extremely appealing is he's young, got a really good contract, and he can come in and help you right away, especially at the running back position. But I say that because Anderson is a guy who I didn't really know where he's from. And I mean, I knew he was a receiver. I knew he was decent, but I kind of made a joking comment last week. I have no idea who this guy is. Where did he come from? And he was playing great. But how would you feel if you were an elite receiver? And we also caveat, we understand receivers can be divas from time to time, right? So now you're an elite receiver. You don't have your quarterback anymore. Well, at least not for a while with Baker Mayfield. You got a guy in there, PJ Walker, who's not having a good game, right? And now your best weapon is McCaffrey, possibly out the door. And you're like, well, what's going to be left for me? My numbers are going to suffer. I'm going to suffer. So I wonder out loud to you, Jeremiah, is this maybe a ploy by him to get his butt out the door?
I think that he might be wanting out the door. Clearly, there's problems there, and it may be, his head coach just got fired, and now he's trying to deal with this other staff, and he's frustrated because they're not doing what he feels they should be doing. They're struggling, and he thinks they could be a good team. Like you said, with Baker Mayfield being out, and they have PJ Walker, which I like PJ Walker overall. He used to play for Temple back in the day. He actually played in the XFL. And that's how he got signed to Carolina. It was after playing in the XFL, and he was one of the few players that actually just looked really good out there, and a few quarterbacks that actually looked really good. And so then he actually got to join an NFL roster after playing in the XFL, which was cool. And I kind of wanted him to be okay. And then watching the game today, the guy had he was 10 for 16. I think we were talking earlier, for 60 yards in pretty much the entire game. And then actually shout out Jacob Eason, former Georgia Bulldog, who got put in the game. And he got put in the game for pretty much one drive. And he was 3 for 5. He did throw an interception that was his fault, in my opinion, on there. But he had 60 yards or 59 yards in 3 for 5 passing late in that game. So he was just as productive as PJ Walker was in one drive throughout, instead of basically the entire game. And so there's clear frustration in the passing game and a terrible offensive production in general from them today. I think they scored 10 points. So that's obviously a lot of the frustration for a guy like Robbie Anderson, who is a decent receiver. And like you said, he just feels like it could hurt him. If he's playing with a guy like that, throwing like that, it's going to hurt his ability to get signed by somebody else. It hurts his trade, value and everything like that. And then you add in the fact that, Christian McCaffrey is being talked about going somewhere else. And I don't really know how that's going to play out. I don't know what your thoughts are on Christian McCaffrey maybe landing somewhere else. I understand them trying to trade him because they can get something pretty decent in return. And maybe Christian McCaffrey can go somewhere and actually play, with a decent team this year. I don't know.
Well, the one thing I'll say about McCaffrey is I worry that he's not going to be the same back after all those injuries. And a lot of times when running backs start to experience injuries, they're never able to recover or bounce back to what they were. Save Adrian Peterson, and he's one of a kind, right? I mean, there's only really been one example of a guy who has had serious injuries and then came back and been just as good, if not before. But McCaffrey, when he was at his peak, was arguably the best back in the NFL, and he was so good out of the backfield, catching the ball in, especially in open space. And that's really what this game is about now. And he is such a weapon. I mean, to me, he's like a more muscular Cooper Kupp. What Cooper Kupp's able to do, he's just a more physical version of that.
A little smaller, a little shorter.
The article that I read earlier this week from ESPN was talking about, for Christian McCaffrey, they either want a really high pick or a couple good picks. So let's just use our Falcons, for example, right? We thought that we were going to have a top 5 pick, and we will get to that in just a moment. But now you're looking like a mid-round pick, right? So for the Falcons to get Christian McCaffrey, you would have to give up probably a 1 based on where you're probably going to pick at this point. Or maybe you'd have to give a 2 and a 3 to get McCaffrey and keep your 1. Now, would I love to have Christian McCaffrey on this Falcons football team? Absolutely, I would, because I think he's an explosive playmaker. I think with this offense, with Marcus Mariota, with the run pass option, even with Desmond Ridder run pass option, I like that combination. But I think there are a lot of teams out there that could really use a player like Christian McCaffrey. My question would be, would you be willing to give up a middle of the round 1, or like a 2 and a 3, or a 3 and a 4, or something like that? And that's where you're getting dangerous for me, because if he's healthy, he's 100% worth it. But I have a lot of questions.
Well, I think my biggest question on that too, and I don't know this answer off the top of my head because I wasn't prepared to get too deep into this conversation, I think, but
It's
um,
what we do.
it's what we do. We jump into different things of it. But I don't how much time does he have left on his contract? That would be a huge factor for me. If he's on
I
his
think it's
last
like
year of
2
his
or 3 years.
contract, okay,
It's
if
a
he's got a
friendly,
couple seasons, then yeah, I'd probably give up a couple picks for him.
and he
I
restructured
think I
his
would.
deal to make it a team-friendly deal, and that is what really makes him tradable. And that's what the article ESPN. So
Yeah. So if that's the case, then yeah, personally, as a Falcons fan or something like that, I'd be willing to give up something for him in general. But I will say this: our running game for the Falcons has actually looked pretty good over the last 3 weeks. They've
yes,
actually played, and Cordell Patterson being out doesn't help you there, but the other guy like Huntley has been incredible in the absence as well. So I think you actually in the running game are doing pretty good with the Falcons, that I wouldn't see the Falcons make a trade for him like that necessarily.
I was just bringing them up just because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
our
yeah.
team.
Yeah, exactly. But no, but it's fair though, because technically speaking, they don't have a superstar at that position. And so they
Correct.
could go out and get a guy like that if they wanted to add to the offense. But that kind of transitions into a talking point of the Falcons with this. And the Falcons' problem overall hasn't been the offensive side, quite honestly. They've been scoring
No.
enough points. The problem is they've been giving up too many points defensively, and they've started losing games because of that. That's been their issue forever. I think Jonathan pointed this stat out at one point in time and said that Matt Ryan never played with a top 15 pick, or I'm sorry, top 15 ranked defense in his entire career with the Falcons. So not even a top 50th percentile like defense the Falcons had when they had Matt Ryan, and yet they've been in so many big games, and down the stretch they've been looking pretty good. And then all of a sudden it kind of fell apart on them because their defense gives up a ton of points late and they lose a game and just choke it away. And it gets really frustrating for Falcons fans to see them just, one stop away from being able to win these big games and they can't get it, right? This season specifically, they've done that once. They gave up a huge lead at the first game of the season and they lost that. Second week, they actually came back from a huge deficit against the Rams and barely came up short on that one. And then the third loss of the season was last week against Tampa Bay, where honestly they should have won. Like they just should have, and they got kind of screwed by a pass interference call, or not pass interference, a roughing the passer call that wasn't a real roughing the passer. Speaking of Tom Brady earlier, but the Falcons overall, I think they're pretty good this year. Surprisingly, they've already won as many games as I thought they would win all season, and here we are 6 weeks in.
Well, I think it's funny because we revisit this every week, and then we kind of alter our opinion a little bit. And, they always say the fans have a moving target. Well, sure. We came into the season, we thought maybe the Falcons would win 3-4 games possibly.
We have low expectations. Exactly.
Yeah. And then they played really good the first game. And if you remember, I came on 4 wide here in the very first week. I said, I hope the Falcons make every single game exciting, but then lose at the end so we can get that high draft pick, right? Yep. Well, and then as we were going on in the season, every single week we're like, they actually could have won that football game. Well, and I think this all started with Dean Pease, where he came out and said, and obviously I'm going to butcher it and paraphrase heavily, is I'm sick and tired of all the bull crap about this, that, and the other, about this defense and how bad we are. He's like, the attitude's gone. I want, when people talk about our defense, to talk about us like we're the Ravens. He's like, the Ravens, when we went there, we made it a defensive football team. They were not when we got there. They were when we left. And people fear the Ravens defense, still do to this day. He's like, that's how I want people to talk about this Atlanta Falcons defense. It's the same way they talk about the Ravens. Now, when I heard that and we talked about it, a lot of different people had an opinion on that. We're like, well, what else did you expect him to say, right? He's a defensive coordinator. What he's supposed to say. And kind of people pointed to last year where they're like, well, he didn't really do a whole lot last year. And he doesn't really have the personnel to do anything. I'll tell you what, Jeremiah, I think Dean Pease is doing a hell of a football job as a coach. I think the football part of what he's doing is doing a hell of a job. He does not have the personnel that he needs to be the Baltimore Ravens, but he's getting the guys that he does have to play above their potential, which is what a good football coach is supposed to do, right? That's what they get paid to do,
Yep.
is coach whatever they have, coach them up to the best of their ability, and get them to produce at a level of expectation or more. And I believe Dean Pease is doing that. And this offense is okay. I'm not going to go and blow smoke up anybody's backside right now. The offense is okay. But our defense has been playing really good, and they're getting better every single week. And if they're able to continue to get better every single week without having a major setback of any type, and injuries don't demolish a very thin depth chart already, I think Dean Pease can have this team as a playoff team. And I don't think that's being stupid at this point. I mean, because we did not think this team could win. But they honestly, Jeremiah, could be undefeated at this point.
No, they could easily be undefeated. That's what, like, the Saints was the first game. They lost that by 1 point in that game. 1 point, right? Like, that's a winnable game. And then you lose by 4 to the Rams in a game, like I said, they were driving down the field late in that game. And I think, if I remember correctly, we might have thrown an interception late in that game that on that final drive and lost it after that.
Fumble.
The fumble. Okay, yeah, yep. And then the Falcons played Seahawks after that, won by 4 points. And then they beat the Browns by 3. And then, like I said last week, we all know how the Buccaneers game went. They did that, which I wanted to talk to you about this today too, because I saw this happen with another team today. Like how are they calling it? The analytical play. When you're down 14, you score a touchdown, and instead of going for the extra point and making it a 7-point game, you go for 2 to make it a 6-point game. Well, the Falcons did that last week. Got the 2-point conversion, made it a 6-point game against the Buccaneers, and then proceeded to lose that game because of that roughing the passer call that was bogus. Which since then, the NFL has come back out, by the way, yesterday or today, and saying that they defend that decision to call it roughing the passer, which of course they did because they're protecting the league, and it is what it is. But at the end of the day, we all saw it and know that it was weak, and everybody across every network and everywhere talked about how it was a stupid call. But the point is, they could easily be undefeated this season, and they've kept the score. Like you said, the defense has actually played fairly well. The biggest shout out to the defense today that I had for them was not the passing defense, because they did give up almost 300 yards passing to Garoppolo, but they only allowed 50 rushing yards today. That's the stat that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
50 rushing yards in an NFL football game. That's wild. And that's how you win that football game. Yeah, you let them throw for 300, but if a team in the NFL can only rush for 50 yards, it's a very tough game to win, right? And the Falcons, on the other hand, did not throw the ball a lot, but Marcus Mariota was 13 for 14 today. So he was very efficient when he did throw the ball, and he only threw for 129 yards, but we ran for 168 yards. And that was because in the second half, the Falcons were up by 7 to go into the second half. And then they proceeded to score a touchdown in the third quarter. And at that point, they had a 14-point lead. You're just trying to bleed that clock and win that football game. So you're not going to sit here and air it out a bunch, because the running game was working at that point too. So the biggest shout out was defense only allowed 14 points, and the defense got a touchdown. Don't forget about that. They scored a touchdown today on the scoop and score. So your defense really won you this game, because the offense, even though they put up 21 points for you and the defense put up the other 7, the offense wasn't phenomenal. That defense really won you the game. And that's the most bizarre thing to see for Falcons, because we don't see that. Like you said, like, this is a different type of feel for a Falcons defense than I'm used to seeing.
Well, you're absolutely right. Now, the one thing that with a good defense, the one thing you have to have is a strong rushing game. Now, the Falcons did get 168 yards on the ground, 40 carries as a team, and it was spread out. Like Caleb Huntley, hardly knew ye, 59 yards. Tyler Algiers, or whatever his name is, had 51 yards. But I think a bigger question across the league is, where have all the running backs gone? Like, think about trying to play fantasy football, like, and trying to set your lineup with running backs. It's like 1 week they'll have 2 points, the next week they'll have 27. How in the heck are you supposed to set your lineup? And
hey, I've been pretty good. Chubb, he's been pretty consistent for me.
He laid an egg today. He didn't do
jack. It wasn't the best, but it was still decent. It was better than I've had from other guys in like lately and stuff like that. He is at least still getting me like 10 points. Even like you said, he laid an egg and he still got me like 10 points today.
So, I mean, my point is, like, how can the Falcons have a roster and not have a real running back? Like, I mean, Georgia puts out like 3 a year. Yeah. So I don't get it. But that's kind of my point is, like, with what the Falcons are wanting to do, Marcus Mariota is doing a good job. Now, granted, he kind of got to put his head on a spike for those first 2 games where he kind of cost us those games. Although we're probably not in the game if it's not for him. So it's like
It's a double-edged sword. Yeah.
Right, 100% kissing your cousin
Yeah.
on that situation.
Oh, God.
Roll Tide. So
Dear
anyway,
God.
my point is, like, if the Falcons are able to continue playing defense like that, they're going to have to rely on a strong rushing game. So the guys on this roster better figure out how to get some positive yards, because having 50 yards a game is that's not what you need. You need somebody who can put up 100 yards on the ground. Getting Cordell Patterson back would be amazing. I don't know exactly how long he's out for.
That I don't know either. I haven't seen any updates on it either, so I don't have a clue.
And then I guess the one bouquet that we have to throw, first of all, who the hell is Michael Pruitt? I mean, it's not Michael. It's Mycole, Michael Pruitt. And you know what? If any one of y'all say, I know who that is, that's my guy. Shut up. No, you don't. There's no way. But we have to give a bouquet because Kyle Pitts caught a touchdown. He is our Julio Jones. Like, he catches all these balls, gets all these yardage, and never gets anything in the red zone. And they asked Arthur Smith, and he's like, it's not fantasy football. I don't care. It's like, dude, shut up. He's your best player. Buck Bellew had a huge segment where he just ripped Arthur Smith's ass and just told him, you better figure it out. He's your best player. Your job is to scheme him open. Georgia does it. All these colleges, they don't have – everybody knows that Brock Bowers is the guy that the Dogs want to get the ball to, but yet they still figure out a way to do it, right? So anyway, my point is that Kyle Pitts is a guy who should have a ton of red zone targets. He only had 3 targets the entire afternoon. Good for Kyle Pitts. He came down with all 3 of them, and he got a touchdown. And so did Michael.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, especially in the NFL, when you've got really good defensive backs and linebackers and stuff that can play in coverage and stuff, I think what happens is you get into the red zone, and like you said, he is your guy, and so he starts getting double or maybe triple teamed, and and so it gets hard to throw him the ball. And so sometimes it might come down to your quarterback just looking away from him because they kind of expect him to be covered or expect him to have a double team, and that means somebody else is going to be open. I don't know. But I'm with you. I think that's a guy that you got to scheme him open. That's what your job is to do when you've got a guy like that on your roster. So that's what you want to see. But you mentioned a little bit ago about not having that many running backs in the league that are going off, and I brought up Nick Chubb. Well, Nick Chubb and them, they didn't have a great game today in general. Chubb only had 56 yards, and that's a really low performance for 12 carries for him. But that team as a whole, the Browns got destroyed by the Patriots. Patriots 38-15. The Browns are now 2-4. And get this, Bailey Zappi, I saw this today. He is the first rookie quarterback to win his first 2 starts and have a 100-plus passer rating in the same game. He threw for 309 yards and 2 touchdowns today. This dude, out of Western Kentucky, I think it was a 4th-round draft pick. I didn't know anything about him until he got he took over for when he took over for what's the dude's name? Quarterback. I'm blanking.
Mac Jones.
Thank you. I started calling him AJ McCarron. Jesus.
Same player.
I went for a different Alabama quarterback from back in the day. But how do you think about the rookie stepping up like that in that game? Did you think that when Mac Jones, I don't know how long he's out, but he keeps playing like this, Mac Jones might not get his job back?
I don't think Mac Jones is elite. I think Mac Jones was doing a good job
with you on that.
Yeah, he'd just been a game manager. But I don't know that Bailey Zappi is doing much more than what Mac Jones was doing. But you're right. It might be a Jake Fromm situation where whenever the quarterback gets healthy, like Jacob Eason when he got back, and it was funny because we were talking pregame about this with Jacob Eason, where it's just unfortunate for him that Jacob Eason, when he got injured, was a unquestioned quarterback, where Mac Jones, obviously with the Patriots, unquestioned quarterback, and the guy comes in and does everything that the coach wants him to do and executes and starts winning football games. It's very difficult to replace that guy. Now, we see a lot of teams do it. The Cowboys are going to do it. The minute Dak Prescott's healthy, they're going to put him back in. They are. They pay him too much money to sit on the bench. I think the only difference is that Mac Jones is not getting paid a lot of money. So you can afford to have him on the bench, right? So I think this is a situation 100% worth paying attention to. But let's talk about the Browns for a second, right? Started out 2-0, really hot, then lost a couple games that they should not have lost. They pulled the Falcons and maybe pissed away a game that they shouldn't have lost. And now they've, if I'm not mistaken, they've lost 4 in a row. right? They started out 2-0. Now they're 2-4.
For who? Say it
Maybe
again.
I'm wrong.
Talking about the Browns?
Yeah. But, I mean, the guy who's playing quarterback is that why am I drawing a blank on the Browns personnel?
The quarterback?
Yeah, the quarterback that they got right now.
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett did a good job. He was playing really well early in the season, and now it's just falling apart. And I feel
He had
bad
2
for Nick Chubb.
interceptions today. Yeah, Nick Chubb, I feel bad for Nick Chubb too because he had such a good spot and they were doing so well. And then all the crap happened with Baker Mayfield and he got traded. And now they've got their Deshaun Watson still sitting out for the first 11 games and stuff. So maybe it'll turn around. But like 11 games is a long time for the season for them to be running with Jacoby Brissett. And once again, I'm not hating on him because he has played fairly well this season. And he's just got a lot of stuff going on over there. Another game, though, that really kind of caught me by surprise, and we're at like 30 minutes, so we're going to start running through some of these games a little bit quicker. Another game that really stood out, the Jets 27-10 over the Packers. The Packers only put up 10 points today. And, the Jets just look good. They're actually looking pretty darn good this season.
That is by far that is my biggest surprise team of the year. You may have a different one, and feel free to give it to me. But for me, the Jets. I mean, we saw Zach Wilson play last year. I was not overly impressed with Zach Wilson was able to do. He got dinged up to begin this year. I didn't know how effective and healthy he would be. The Jets have surrounded him with some pretty darn good personnel. Bryce Hall is a freaking animal, dude. Like, I mean, that guy's putting up monster. He had 20 carries, 116 yards, and a touchdown. I just traded him away for Travis Kelce because I thought that was a smart move, and that may be a dumb move because Hall might end up being one of the best backs in the NFL. I know it's really early, but he's doing in the NFL this year what everybody thought he was going to do at Iowa State last year, which he didn't necessarily do, which was just dominate, and he's doing that. So the Jets, to me, by far, early in the football season, are my biggest surprise team. I think they're playing outstanding football. Their coach is doing a great job. And the Packers, I think Aaron Rodgers has every reason to be pissed off. I think Aaron Rodgers has every reason to walk away from that football team. He wanted to trade in offseason. They didn't trade him. They have never supported that man. I mean, he walked into a situation where he had some good receivers at the beginning. Now, when they beat the Falcons at home in the playoffs, if you remember that game, it was like a video game. They were scoring like every play. Like they had so many freaking weapons. Now those people left, right? And they went to other places and they were not good anywhere else. So then you started to question like, well, hold on a minute. Did they surround them with amazing pass catchers or was Aaron Rodgers the reason they were amazing? And I think you're starting to see this entire time Aaron Rodgers has been the reason these guys were amazing. And they've never gone out and put weapons around them. Now, they have done a good job building up the offensive line, which you should be thankful for, and the defense, which you should be thankful for.
And Adams was his big target. And
they let him go.
Yeah, they let him go. And that it's like after he left and stuff, and then now Rodgers is struggling. Funny thing is, back in those days where you're talking about them being good, Randall Cobb was one of those good receivers. They have Randall Cobb right now. He's just old, and he's not necessarily the same guy anymore. So they do still have one of those guys. It's just he's not the same guy anymore. And I liked Randall Cobb. He's always been pretty good in his career with them. And no, that's just a weird twist for this season for Green Bay. I think we all expected them to have a lot better of a season, and they're really just struggling. They lost last week to the Giants. They lose again this week to the Jets. Both, and that's the other team that I was going to say. The Giants are a team that actually have surprised me this season. They just beat the Ravens today. And they are now 5-1. That's my surprise team of the season because the Giants were not good last year, if I remember correctly. They struggled. And now they're 5-1. They just beat Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. That's a huge win, 24-20.
New coach, and Daniel Jones actually looks like a legitimate quarterback. I wouldn't say like an elite. I'm just saying he looks like a quarterback.
Good quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be leading your team, right?
Right.
And listen, I we'll talk about this on our own separate shows, but I think that some teams are starting to figure out the right coaching. You're starting to see it in college where a lot of these programs are starting to have success, and it's because they're starting to figure out the coach. Well, I think in the NFL, a lot of these last couple of years, there's been a lot of turnover with these coaches, and they've just not done a good job of identifying coaches for each situation. However, I think you're seeing with the early success with a lot of these coaches that they're starting to figure it out, like what works and what doesn't work. And 100%, Colonel Sanders, Robert. You're right. Barkley's healthy. What does a middle to average quarterback have to be successful? A good running game. So that is a great addition to the show. Thank you so much for that.
22 carries and 83 yards today and a touchdown. And he looked comfortable. I think that's the big thing. Is it's not even just him being able to. The one thing is the fact that he's able to run the ball 22 times is clearly telling you he's feeling pretty good if they're comfortable doing it, and he is able to do that. But then while getting those 22 carries, he still looks dominant. He's running through players, and he is very physical again. And that's what you need to see from a guy like that. And yes, you are correct. That is exactly what a guy like Daniel Jones needs to help him continue to succeed. And I mean, he didn't blow the stat line away himself. Like, Daniel Jones was 19 for 27, 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. So not even 200 yards passing. And that run game really, really helped, because even like as crazy as it is, those 83 yards, they only had 83 yards as a team rushing. The other guys negatively impacted that number. So he literally accounted for basically all of those rushing yards Saquon Barkley did. And that's all they needed to win this game against the Ravens, which tells you a lot about the Ravens this year too, because 83 rushing yards and 173 passing yards, and that was enough to beat the Ravens.
Well, and one thing to keep your eye on with the Ravens and the Falcons, link those two teams together in your brain. The Falcons are continue to win. That draft pick gets worse, right? And takes you out of the sweepstakes for any legitimate quarterback. Okay.
Right.
I have told you the one thing that we know wins in Atlanta is a playmaking superstar. And Lamar Jackson did not sign an extension with the Ravens for a reason. And I think the stars are aligning for him to exit Baltimore, end up here in Atlanta. Now, I'm not saying that's a good situation. And I'm not saying that's even what I want. It could be. But I think we are on a collision course for Lamar Jackson to be the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons next year. And imagine what we could do if we go get a legitimate running back with a high pick next year, give Lamar Jackson a bully back. And we do have some targets. Calvin Ridley, here's the one thing nobody's thinking about. Calvin Ridley's coming back next year to somewhere. He wanted out of Atlanta. You trying to tell me if we have a legit running back, maybe Christian McCaffrey. You have Lamar Jackson, who you don't have to trade anybody for, and Calvin ain't staying, my guy. Okay, I say he stays. Anyway, there's conspiracy theory for the show.
I think it's, once again, I stand by. We've talked about this privately. Like, we were texting about this at one point, like 3 weeks ago or something like that. We're talking about Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson's a fit for Atlanta. I think that they could do something with him in Atlanta. There's a reason they went out and got, Marcus Mariota and Ritter. Those are the two quarterbacks that the Falcons have on their roster right now. They're athletic. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. Lamar Jackson fits the mold that they went out and got, this season at quarterback themselves. So I do think he fits the scheme in Atlanta, and I think he's a lot higher caliber player than those two guys as well that I just mentioned. And he's also more proven NFL guy. It is, it's one of those things that Atlanta just, quarterback-wise, there's always controversy around it. Matt Ryan leaving and going where he did, which, by the way, Matt Ryan had quite the day for the Colts today. The dude threw 58 times, but he had 389 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. I mean, talk about carrying your team on your back. And they needed every bit of that today, because that game was a tight one. It was 34-27. They won on a late touchdown too.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence has had 2 really bad back-to-back games, and Trevor Lawrence actually came out and was being productive today and had the Jaguars in position to win that football game. Matt Ryan able to dig into that bag one more time. And, there was always a saying here in Atlanta that if Matt Ryan had to throw the ball over 40 times, I think was the number, that they were losing that game. Or maybe it was 35. It wasn't a whole lot. But if Matt Ryan went over that, they were losing every single game. But look at him putting up those, and good for him.
The problem, though, with that, the reason for that, I think that people didn't pay attention to is the reason, because usually if he had to throw for 35 times or more, it's because our defense was giving up a crap ton of points, and so he was in a shootout. So it was putting him in a bad spot to play. It's less on him. It's more on the fact that he shouldn't have to throw the ball that many times. I think that was the issue that you were running into. It was just one of those things that I think it just wasn't a good spot anymore. And so we talked about him last week, and he's had a couple rough weeks. So I was really excited to see him have a game like that and get to kind of carry a team again. It looked good, and I was excited about it. But I think we need to hit one more game from today, and then we'll get into the
Absolutely.
picks for next week. The big game of the day was the last one that ended right as we were coming on here, and I was talking about it. Bills and Chiefs. Bills ended up holding on to win 24-20 with a last-minute interception from Patrick Mahomes. Quite a crazy game. Everybody remembers last year's playoff game that was probably the best game I've ever watched in the NFL as far as the most exciting. It was back and forth, and it all came down to an overtime coin toss that ended up giving that game to Patrick Mahomes. At that game, it was weird because neither offense was not going to score when they got on the field. They were putting points up on the board in overtime if they got it. If the Bills got the ball to start in that overtime possession, they would have scored. I 100% believe that that's the case. So, but today, 20-24, that was a defensive game, and I watched that game today, and it was a very different look. Like the quarterbacks played okay and had some good plays and stuff like that, but the defenses really stepped up in that game. It was a different type of environment from what I thought I was going to see when I turned that game on today.
Well, yeah, and of course I benched Juju Smith-Schuster because he hasn't done jack squat all
He
year
scored his
long, and he
first
goes for
touchdown today.
113 and a
Yep.
touchdown.
Yep.
Good heavens. Now, listen, I think the Bills and the Chiefs are obviously two of the best teams in the entire NFL. I mean, not even just the AFC, but just the entire NFL. And, anytime that those two teams are on as much watch TV, I think it's a real shame that game was not the Sunday night game or Monday Night Football. That makes sense. There's no way this game should be buried in the 4 o'clock window. That's a terrible job. NFL does one thing really well, and that's TV, except for Thursday night. That is a screw you to Jeff Bezos. There's no way on earth you can convince me that they thought those games were going to be good and they just happened not to be. That is like, hey, bro.
All the Thursday night games have been so bad this year. Every single one. And next week, by the way, the Thursday night game is the Saints and Cardinals. 2-4 teams, by the way. 2-4, both of them. That's our Thursday night game. So I think you're right. They said, screw you, Jeff Bezos. You get the crappy games.
So, yeah, but like this game is a primetime game. I mean,
it should have been.
If I give you any matchup in the NFL, is there another matchup in your mind, quickly, is there another matchup in your mind that you would rather see than this game?
No, because once again, knowing how it played out last year, like I 100%, like last year was such a good game. I expected another game like that, and it was different. It played out different, but it was still as exciting. You still got enough offense. And I made a comment about the quarterbacks a minute ago, and they both actually did play overall incredible, except the 2 interceptions by Mahomes ended up being the difference in the game. But Josh Allen had 330 yards or 329 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And Mahomes was 338 for 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So like the quarterbacks were dueling. The points just didn't get it put up on the board the same way as it did that last time. But what did remind me, and this is how I kind of thought the game was going to go when I was watching, today at the end of it, I thought it was going to end up being a shootout at the end. But at halftime, this is the last thing I want to say about it. At halftime, they were the Bills were at their own 2-yard line, I think, and it was 3rd and 13. They proceeded to not only get that first down, but in 4 plays, drive the entire field and take a touchdown, get a touchdown, and are leading by 3 points. Then they give the ball back to the Chiefs with 12 seconds left in the half. The Chiefs drive down the field and get a field goal to be tied at halftime. Like that's the kind of like the excitement that game brought. Going into halftime, and then at the end of the game, it was a 1 possession back and forth, and all of a sudden it ends with a pick by Mahomes. And it was an exciting game. That's the kind of game that is a lower scoring game that's still fun to watch. It's not a 10-12 game or something like that.
No, again, you got Josh Allen on one side, you got Patrick Mahomes on the other. 2 of the best, if not the 2 best quarterbacks in the entire NFL going right now. You give me that, I will watch it every week. And you've got playmakers surrounding them. Both defenses are good enough. It's a fantastic matchup, and I think it lived up to the building. It lived up to the billing again, and I think it's going to live up to the billing every single time. It's just one of those games. Now that we've had a chance to talk about that, Cowboys and Eagles tonight. Listen,
that's
Eagles
a good primetime game. I'm not going to lie.
It is.
That's a good primetime game.
So, I mean, first of all, name value, right? It gets you name value because it's a historic matchup that they hate each other. I mean, just watch the movie Invincible.
Conference rivals. It's a good game.
Yeah, it's absolutely a good game. And you have a 4-1 team with a backup quarterback who's playing really, really well. And you have the Eagles, who's 5-0, the only undefeated team in the NFL. A lot of people, and listen, if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, our boys are doing a great job on that defensive side of the ball. So A great matchup. Do I think it's more exciting than the other game? No, but it has the name value, and it's definitely a game I'm going to watch. I know you're going to watch it. Philly,
Absolutely.
7-point favorite. What you got?
7 points is a lot for that game. I think. It's a one possession game. It could end up being a field goal game. So 7 points is tough. But I'm really rolling with with the Eagles on this because as far as a straight up win, I'm not saying by points, but I'm going to say as a straight up win, I like them to win this game. They've played incredibly well. Jalen Hurts has had a phenomenal season. I feel like every single week we come on here and I have nothing but good things to say about them. But Cooper Rush has had a good season as well. I think this is a challenge that we'll see how good the Cowboys defense is tonight. They've been playing well over all this season. Tonight's going to be a challenge for them with Jalen Hurts on the other side. And then you've got to see if Cooper Rush can score enough points if their defense doesn't hold up as well as they've held up this entire season.
I think there's just something in the air right now in Philadelphia. I mean, their baseball team came out and absolutely put it on our Braves. Congratulations, Phillies. I just think there's something in the air right now with the Eagles. I am not an Eagles fan, but I am a fan of Jordan Davis and Kobe Dean, and I hope they absolutely ball out. Like you said, I mean, I think this is going to be a really, really tight game. I think the Eagles are going to win. I don't know if they're going to cover the 7 points. I mean, I'll take the Eagles and the points just because. But I mean, there's a reason I don't gamble, Jeremiah. It's because I'm not good at it.
It's tough, man. The picking the spreads and stuff like that are tough. I like to, instead of going the spreads a lot, I like to just pick a winner of the game because I feel like I can do that a lot better. Like the points is what makes it so difficult. Saying that they're going to win by 7, I'm not confident in saying that, but I do think they win the game. Like you said, they're having a really good season. But the next one is, see, this is one of those primetime games on Monday night that I don't know how good of a game it's going to be. You get the Broncos and the Chargers. I think the Chargers are a 4.5-point favorite over the Broncos at home in I almost said in San Diego. It's not in San Diego anymore, but in California, LA, right? Are they in LA? Wherever they're at, I don't know.
Yeah, they're in LA in that big, beautiful palace they built.
Yeah. So that game at home, who do you have?
I mean, I'm going to Chargers, and I'll take the 4.5 points. I think the Broncos are terrible. I think Russell Wilson is terrible. I know that they had a good game last time, but I need to be proven wrong, Jeremiah. I'm not a fan of that team. I don't like what they do, whatever. I will say I am a little bit hesitant because Justin Herbert, I don't know how healthy that guy is. I don't know that he should have been playing, to be completely honest.
He's still dealing with his rib stuff. Is that the case?
I think so. I mean, does that go away after a week?
No. I assume that, that cartilage breaking like that, it probably takes a little bit for it to, fuse itself back together and give you a little bit. But no, I'm with you. I would take the points on this one. Russell Wilson, we talked a lot about that last week, so I won't get too much into it. But the guy's only got 4 touchdowns in the season. We're 5 games. This is going into the 6th game of the season. He's 5 games. He's got 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He is really struggling. And I don't think that that's going to turn around too much. I think it's a road game against a pretty decent team. I don't think they're a great team, but the Chargers are a decent team. And Herbert, when he is healthy, is a great quarterback in this league. And I think that they'll roll with a 4.5-point spread, I think.
Well, I think we have covered just about anything. I'm the only other thing I was going to mention was Teddy Bridgewater getting back in the game. Should he have been back in the game?
Real quick on that, we got it. Just real quick, because he didn't. That Skylar, I can't remember the guy's name. The other guy,
Thompson, right?
Skylar Thompson. He started the game for Miami, gets hurt and goes out, and then Teddy Bridgewater has to come back into the game. There's a reason Teddy Bridgewater didn't start this week because he was their second quarterback. So he would have been the guy that started if he should have been in the game. But they put him in. I don't know if it's out of necessity where they had to put him in or what the case was, but it's not a good look when you've been he's dealt with a concussion issue himself after the whole Tua stuff. And I don't know, man. It was rough seeing him go back into that game.
Yeah, I mean, he made it through the game, actually put up pretty decent numbers. I was kind of joking with you. Teddy Bridgewater is that guy who's going to put up a lot of numbers, but he doesn't win football games. It's just unfortunate. But I don't know. I mean, it's just not a good look. Like you said, optics of it. Maybe there's nothing wrong with it, right? Maybe there's not. Maybe they were holding him out.
He cleared everything, and they were just giving him a little bit more rest. Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe that's all it was. The optics just aren't good because of what happened to Tua, and it's the same team, and they've already whatever. So, but I think we've hit everything. Have we
Yep.
not? And then
It is 8:20 right now. That game is about
kickoff
to kick
time.
off. So we are timing it pretty well again this week like we did last week. So we are going to wrap it up. Once again, Jeremiah Stoddard, Dan Kiley with the 4 Wide Podcast. Next week, we should have Jonathan back with us, full swing again, and we will bring you guys some great content. Everybody sit back and enjoy this game. I think tonight's primetime game actually will be a good one, so everybody
Yes.
enjoy it. We will see you guys next week. Dude, I closed it out, and I'm not used to this thing, and it like left.
You got to hit. It's broadcast is still going.
Oh, guys.